Let's take a look at the Data Conditioning Editor dialog in ProRaster. I'm using ProRaster Premium. So, data conditioning can be specified for any component in a layer. So if we go to this color component, you can see there's a drop list here for a data conditioning filter object. You can select it and then it will become part of the algorithm. So data conditioning is a filtering operation that's applied to the raster data before it gets rendered. And the main goal of data conditioning is to remove bad data values from your data stream before they get into your rendering stream. So to create data conditioning filters, you go to the Data Conditioning Editor dialog, and here it is here. Now these all get saved onto your hard disk. So you'll be able to reuse them at any time. So the idea is you'll build up a kind of a library of useful filters and you'll be able to apply them to your algorithms. So to add a data conditioning transform or filter, hit the plus button, and then you have to give it a name. And like all other resources in ProRaster, it has to have a unique name. So we'll call this my filter, hit return, or press this tick button, and you can now see that my filter is on the list of data conditioning transforms. So you can then delete it, or you can clone it via this button, and this button over here will delete all of the data conditioning definitions. And like all of these dialogues, in order to make changes permanent, you have to hit the OK button and dismiss the dialog. And if you hit the cancel button instead, then all your changes will be discarded and nothing will have been modified. So let's just work through these controls. So firstly, you can specify that certain values are going to be invalid. So for example, minus 9999, that's a bad value. And in some cases, that can appear in your raster for some reason, and might have been a null value, for example, that's been interpreted incorrectly. So you can add that value into this value list, and you can do as many as you want. Add that one as well, and add, for example, with Landsat data, 0 is often a bad value. So you can add these things into your list. So what will happen is, in the rendering process, it'll go and acquire the data from the raster. It'll run that raster data through the filter. It'll check to see if any of the values are matched. And if they are, then it will return an invalid result. So in other words, it will convert the raster cell from a valid cell with a bad number into an invalid cell. And so it'll look like it's a null cell. It'll be empty. So that's your value list. You can also specify a value range. So for example, if I want to say everything from 10 up to 50 is invalid, I can make a range like that, and you can make as many ranges as you want. On the other hand, if you want to say everything between 0 and 100 is valid and everything outside of that range is invalid, then turn off the inclusive button, and then you'll see you've got outside 0 to 100. So that means everything outside of that range is going to get turned into an invalid number, invalid cell. If you're working with color data, you can specify the color that you want to be invalid, or a color range that you want to be invalid. So you tick the components in the color that you're working with. So for example, it might be red, green, blue data. So we have red, green, blue ticked. And then you might say, well, white is a color that I want removed from my raster. So you put in 255, 255, 255, which is white. Add that in there. And it says that this value is going to be removed. Now, if you want to delete a range of colors, so let's say I've got, like some gray, 128, 128. But everything within, say, 16 units of that color, I want that to be removed. You can put this in as well. So now you're removing sort of a wide range of colors from the data. And we've seen that before with things like the ECW files, where there might be a white boundary around the raster, but there's noise in that white color, so it's not all perfect 255, 255, 255. It's slightly off-white. So you put in this range, and that'll pick up those additional colors. And then you can come in and delete these things and add others as you see fit. Now, the filter will proceed basically in the direction that the controls are shown. So, so these initial value matching operations will decide whether or not the raster value is valid or invalid. If it's invalid, then you can convert it to something else. So for example, we can convert it to a background value, of whatever, say 100 or 0. So then the output of the filter will be a valid value, and it will be assigned the background value. And then finally, you can cap values below a minimum value. So I can say everything that's below 0 will be 0. It won't be made invalid. So if I had -10, it would be transformed into 0. And you can say cap values above a maximum value, so say 100. And that means that any value above 100 will be transformed into 100. Then you hit OK, and that will store your data conditioning transform. So let's delete that, and we'll just make another one. My filter. Oops. Make sure we hit the add button first, my filter. And we put in a range list, so let's go from 0 to say 50, and we'll null all of those out. So from 0 to 50, let's see what happens when we put this into here. Select filter, and you can see that some of this low blue data has now turned to background and has disappeared from the raster because it's been removed by that data conditioning filter. Let's go back in and edit it, and let's convert it now to a background value of, let's say, 50. Hit OK. Now all those values have become valid again, but they've become 50. So that's the data conditioning editor in ProRaster.